Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The autumn breeze whispered through the trees, carrying a chill that sent a shiver down Abel's exposed skin as he arrived at the bustling campus, his nerves as taut as the strings of a violin. He adjusted the folds of the pleated skirt, its soft pink hue a stark contrast to his usual rugged style. His fingers grazed the delicate fabric of the white blouse, a far cry from his preferred cotton t-shirts. The unfamiliar ensemble felt like a disguise, an alter ego taking form. Abel ran his hand over the smooth strands of the brunette wig, a subtle shade of auburn that gleamed under the morning sun. "Just breathe," he whispered, his voice steady, yet laced with apprehension. 7 days, he reminded himself, and I can go back to being me. A bet had led him here, and he was determined to see it through. His roommate, Tyler, had wagered Abel couldn't go a full day without his phone. 12 hours in, Abel had caved, desperate to check his messages. Now, he was paying the price.
"Remember, you're Kaya this week," Tyler had told him that morning, applying the final touches of makeup. "Embrace it. Have fun with it. You might surprise yourself."
Easy for Tyler to say. He wasn't the one parading around campus in a getup that made him feel more exposed than if he'd shown up naked. Abel took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and strode toward his first class. He focused on the steady click of his low heels against the sidewalk, trying to find a rhythm that felt natural. As he neared the humanities building, a group of students exited, holding the door.
"Thanks,"
Abel murmured, his voice higher than usual. He'd been practicing all weekend. "No problem," a guy replied with a smile. "Have a great day." Abel blinked, startled by the unexpected friendliness. Was that how guys usually treated girls? He couldn't recall the last time a stranger had wished him a good day. In the classroom, Abel chose a seat near the back, hoping to avoid attention. As other students filtered in, he kept his head down, fiddling with his pen. The seat beside him creaked.
"Is this spot taken?"
He glanced up to see a girl with a warm smile and kind eyes.
"Oh no, go ahead,"
Abel replied, gesturing to the empty chair. "Thanks, I'm Zoe," she said, extending her hand.
"Kaya,"
Abel stammered, shaking it gently. "Nice to meet you, Kaya. I love your skirt, by the way. Pink is such a great color on you." Abel felt his cheeks warm. "Oh, thank you. I like your sweater," he finished lamely, realizing he had no idea how to compliment women's clothing. Zoe beamed. "Thanks! I'm obsessed with chunky knits this season. So cozy, you know?" Before Abel could fumble for a response, the professor entered, and class began. He found himself relaxing as the lecture progressed, scribbling notes, and even raising his hand to answer a question. When class ended, Zoe turned to him again. "Hey, want to grab coffee? I could use a caffeine boost before my next class." Abel hesitated. On one hand, he was terrified of prolonged interaction. On the other, he was surprised to find himself curious about this easy camaraderie.
"Sure,"
he heard himself say. "That sounds nice." As they walked to the campus coffee shop, Zoe chatted about her major, her part-time job at the library, and her cat named Pancake. Abel found himself smiling, charmed by her enthusiasm. "So, what about you?" Zoe asked as they joined the line. "What's your story, Kaya?" Abel froze. He hadn't prepared a backstory. "Oh, I'm new here," he said, which wasn't entirely a lie. "Just transferred this semester. Still finding my way around, you know? Zoe nodded sympathetically. Oh man, I remember those days. Well, stick with me, and I'll show you the ropes. What's your major?
Computer science.
Abel replied truthfully. No way! That's so cool! I'm always in awe of you tech-savvy types. I can barely figure out my phone sometimes. Zoe laughed. As they ordered their drinks, Abel reached for his wallet, only to realize with horror that he'd forgotten to bring cash. His cheeks burned with embarrassment. I think I left my wallet in my dorm, he mumbled. No worries, Zoe said cheerfully. I've got you covered. Pay me back another time. Abel stammered his thanks, touched by her easy generosity. They found a small table by the window, and as they sipped their coffees, Abel found himself relaxing into the conversation. Zoe was easy to talk to, and he found himself sharing more than he'd intended about his interests and hobbies. Oh, shoot! I've got class in 5 minutes! Zoe exclaimed, glancing at her watch. This was fun, though. We should hang out again sometime. Want to exchange numbers? Abel blinked, surprised. He'd never made a friend so quickly before. Sure, he said, reciting his number as Zoe typed it into her phone. Great! I'll text you later. Have a fantastic day, Kaya. As Zoe hurried off, Abel sat for a moment, processing the whirlwind interaction. He'd expected this week to be a humiliating ordeal, but so far it had been surprisingly pleasant. People seemed friendlier, more approachable. Was this what it was like to be a girl? The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes and cautious interactions. Abel found himself growing more comfortable in his role as Kaya, remembering to sit with his legs crossed and to smile more often. By the time he returned to his dorm room, he was exhausted but exhilarated. So, how was day 1? Tyler asked, looking up from his laptop. Abel collapsed onto his bed, kicking off the low heels with a groan of relief. Weird, he admitted. But not terrible? Tyler grinned. Told you it might be fun. Any highlights? Abel recounted his coffee date with Zoe, surprised by the warmth he felt remembering their conversation. It was just so easy, he mused. I've never clicked with someone like that before. Maybe Kaya's more of a people person than Abel, Tyler teased. Abel threw a pillow at him, but the comment stuck in his mind as he prepared for bed. As he removed the wig and wiped off the makeup, he studied his reflection in the mirror. The face looking back at him was familiar, and yet something felt different. He shook his head, dismissing the thought. It was just one day. Things would be back to normal soon enough. The next morning, Abel found himself taking more care with his appearance. He smoothed the auburn wig carefully, making sure no stray hairs were out of place. The makeup routine Tyler had taught him came more easily now, and he even added a swipe of pale pink lip gloss. Looking good, Kaya, Tyler whistled as Abel emerged from the bathroom. You're really getting into this, huh? Abel blushed, adjusting the strap of his bag. Just trying to be convincing, he muttered. As he walked to class, Abel noticed more details around him. The way the autumn leaves crunched under his feet, the scent of pumpkin spice wafting from the coffee shop, the way the morning light caught the dewdrops on the grass. Had the world always been this vibrant? In his first class, he spotted Zoe waving enthusiastically from across the room. He waved back, a smile spreading across his face as he made his way to the empty seat beside her. Morning, Kaya! How are you today? Zoe chirped. I'm good, thanks," Abel replied, surprised to find he meant it. "How about you?" As Zoe launched into a story about her cat's latest antics, Abel found himself leaning in, genuinely interested. He laughed at her jokes, asked follow-up questions, and even shared a few anecdotes of his own. When had he become so chatty? The professor's arrival interrupted their conversation, but Abel found himself sneaking glances at Zoe throughout the lecture. He admired the way she twirled her pen absently as she listened, the small furrow between her brows when she concentrated on taking notes. It wasn't attraction, he told himself. He was just observant. After class, Zoe turned to him with a grin. "Hey, a bunch of us are going to that new Thai place for lunch. Want to join?" Abel hesitated. Lunch with a group of strangers seemed daunting, but the hopeful look in Zoe's eyes made him reconsider. "Sure," he heard himself say. "That sounds fun." The restaurant was bustling with students, the air fragrant with spices. Abel found himself wedged between Zoe and a girl named Emma, who was regaling the table with a story about her disastrous blind date. "And then?" Emma said, barely containing her laughter. "He tried to impress me by doing a handstand in the middle of the restaurant!" The table erupted in giggles, Abel included. He was surprised by how easily he fit into the group dynamic, offering his own opinions and even cracking a few jokes. The conversation flowed naturally from topic to topic: classes, movies, campus gossip. Abel found himself fully engaged, barely noticing as the hours slipped by. It wasn't until his phone buzzed with a text from Tyler that Abel realized how late it had gotten. "Oh, shoot!" he exclaimed, glancing at the time. "I've got a lab in 20 minutes. "Time flies when you're having fun," Zoe grinned. "Need someone to walk you to the science building? I'm headed that way anyway."
"That would be great, thanks,"
Abel replied, gathering his things. As they walked across campus, Zoe linked her arm through his. The casual intimacy startled Abel, but he found he didn't mind. It felt nice, comfortable.
"I'm so glad you joined us for lunch,"
Zoe said. "Everyone loved you. Emma was asking if you'd want to come to her birthday party next weekend." Abel's stomach fluttered with a mix of excitement and anxiety. A party? As Kaya? But before he could overthink it, he found himself nodding. "That sounds like fun. Just let me know the details." Zoe beamed. "Awesome! I'll text you later with the info. Have a great lab, Kaya." As she bounced away, Abel stood for a moment, processing. He'd just agreed to attend a party as his female alter ego. A week ago, the idea would have terrified him. Now, he felt a thrill of anticipation. What was happening to him? The rest of the week passed in a whirlwind of classes, study sessions, and social outings. Abel found himself slipping more easily into Kaya's persona with each passing day. He experimented with different hairstyles, even venturing to try a messy bun one day. His movements became more graceful, his voice softer and more melodic. On Friday evening, as Abel prepared for Emma's birthday party, he realized with a start that he was actually looking forward to it. He hummed softly as he applied his makeup, taking extra care with his eyeliner. The pink dress he'd chosen, borrowed from Tyler's girlfriend, felt comfortable now, like a second skin.
"You seem happy,"
Tyler observed from his bed, where he was engrossed in a video game. Abel paused, considering. "I am," he said, surprised by the realization. "This week has been eye-opening." Tyler set down his controller, giving Abel his full attention. How so? Abel struggled to put his feelings into words. It's like I've discovered a whole new side of myself. People treat me differently as Kaya. They're kinder, more open, and I find myself responding in kind. I feel more me, somehow. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. Have you considered that maybe this isn't just a role you're playing? That maybe Kaya is a part of who you really are? The question hit Abel like a thunderbolt. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, taking in the soft curves of his face, the gentle wave of his auburn hair. For the first time, he allowed himself to really see Kaya, not as a costume, but as an authentic expression of himself. I don't know, he whispered, his voice trembling. What does that mean? Tyler stood, placing a comforting hand on Abel's shoulder. It means you have some thinking to do. But for now, why don't you just enjoy the party? Be yourself, whoever that turns out to be. Abel nodded, taking a deep breath. You're right. Thanks, Tyler. As he made his way to Emma's apartment, Abel's mind whirled with questions and possibilities. But when Zoe greeted him at the door with a warm hug and a delighted, Kaya, you look amazing! He pushed his doubts aside. Tonight was about celebration, about friendship, about joy. The party was in full swing, music pulsing through the crowded apartment. Abel found himself swept up in the energy, dancing and laughing with his new friends. As he twirled under the colorful lights, he felt a sense of freedom he'd never experienced before. Later, as the party wound down, Abel found himself on the balcony, enjoying the cool night air. Zoe joined him, leaning against the railing. Having fun? She asked, her eyes sparkling. Abel nodded, smiling. More than I ever thought possible. Zoe tilted her head, studying him. You know, Kaya, I feel like I've known you forever. There's just something about you that's so genuine. I'm really glad we met. Abel's heart swelled with emotion. Me too, he said softly. You've made this week incredible. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the twinkling city lights. Abel felt a sense of peace wash over him. Whatever questions he had about his identity, whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he had found something precious in these new friendships. As the night drew to a close, Abel said his goodbyes, exchanging hugs and promises to meet up soon. Walking back to his dorm, he felt a bittersweet ache in his chest. Tomorrow, the bet would be over. He was supposed to go back to being just Abel. But as he climbed into bed that night, still wearing the auburn wig, he knew that something fundamental had shifted. The person he'd been at the beginning of the week no longer existed. In his place was someone new, someone who encompassed both Abel and Kaya, someone who was still figuring out exactly who they were meant to be. The next morning, Abel woke early, his mind clear despite the late night. He sat at his desk, opening his laptop to begin what he knew would be a difficult email. Dear Mom and Dad, he typed, his fingers trembling slightly. I hope this email finds you well. I have something important I need to share with you. As the sun rose over the campus, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges, Abel poured his heart out onto the screen. He wrote about the bet, about his week as Kaya, about the revelations and questions that had arisen. He explained his confusion, his fears, and his hope for understanding and support. When he finally hit send, Abel felt as though a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Whatever happened next, he knew he was on the path to becoming his true self. Tyler stirred in his bed, blinking sleepily at Abel.
You okay?
He mumbled, noticing Abel's serious expression. Abel nodded, a small smile playing on his lips.
Yeah,
he said softly.
I think I'm going to be.
As the new week began, Abel faced it not as Abel or as Kaya, but as someone in between. Someone on a journey of self-discovery. The pink skirt and white blouse hung in his closet, no longer a costume but a possibility. The auburn wig sat on his dresser, a reminder of the person he was becoming. He didn't have all the answers yet, but as he stepped out into the crisp autumn morning, Abel felt a sense of hope and excitement for the future. Whatever lay ahead, he knew he had the strength to face it, and friends who would support him every step of the way. The campus bustled with activity as students hurried to their Monday morning classes. Abel, dressed in his usual jeans and hoodie, felt strangely exposed without the feminine attire he'd grown accustomed to over the past week. He'd decided to present as male today, wanting to give himself time to process his feelings and figure out his next steps. As he walked to class, he spotted Zoe in the distance. His heart raced, torn between the desire to greet her and the fear of how she might react to seeing him as Abel. Before he could decide, Zoe looked up, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, confusion flickered across her face, then recognition dawned. "Kaya?" she called out, hurrying over. Is it Abel?" Abel nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah, it's me. I can explain." Zoe's brow furrowed, but her voice was gentle when she spoke. "I think maybe you should. Coffee after class?" Relieved that she wasn't immediately shutting him out, Abel agreed. The next hour of lecture passed in a blur, his mind racing with how to explain his situation to Zoe. When class ended, they made their way to the campus coffee shop in silence. Once they were seated with their drinks, Zoe leaned forward, her eyes filled with concern and curiosity. "So, what's going on? Was this some kind of prank?" Abel took a deep breath, then launched into his story. He told her about the bet, about his initial reluctance, and about the unexpected journey of self-discovery that followed. As he spoke, he watched Zoe's expression shift from confusion to understanding to compassion. "Wow," she said when he finished. "That's a lot to process. How are you feeling about all of this?" Abel stared into his coffee, gathering his thoughts. "Honestly, confused, scared, but also excited. It's like I've discovered this whole other part of myself that I never knew existed. I don't know exactly what it means yet, but I know I can't just ignore it." Zoe reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Thank you for trusting me with this, Abel. Or do you prefer Kaya? Or something else?" "I'm not sure yet," Abel admitted. "I think I need some time to figure that out." Zoe nodded. "That's totally fair. Just know that I'm here for you, whatever you decide. You're my friend, regardless of how you present or what name you use." Tears pricked at Abel's eyes, overwhelmed by Zoe's acceptance. "Thank you," he whispered. "That means more than you know." As they continued to talk, Abel felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Zoe asked thoughtful questions, offering support and resources. She even shared stories of her own journey with identity and self-discovery, though in different contexts. "You know," Zoe mused. I always felt there was something special about you. Even as Kaya, you had this authenticity that drew people in. I think that was the real you shining through, regardless of how you were dressed. Abel blushed, touched by her words.
I felt more like myself this past week than I ever have before,
he admitted. It's scary, but also liberating? Zoe grinned. Well, get ready for more liberation, my friend. We've got a whole journey ahead of us. And don't worry, I'll be right beside you, every step of the way. As they left the coffee shop, making plans to meet up later in the week, Abel felt a surge of hope. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, he felt equipped to face it. With friends like Zoe and Tyler supporting him, he could explore this new aspect of himself without fear. Over the next few weeks, Abel began to experiment more openly with his gender expression. Some days he presented as male, others as female, and sometimes somewhere in between. He started attending a campus support group for gender-questioning individuals, finding comfort and guidance in the stories of others on similar journeys. His parents' response to his email had been cautious but loving. They asked for time to understand and requested regular video chats to stay connected during this period of transition. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As autumn deepened into winter, Abel, who had started using they, them pronouns, felt a sense of peace settling over them. They were no longer trying to fit into a predetermined box, but allowing themselves to exist authentically, day by day. One snowy evening, as they sat in their dorm room, applying makeup for a night out with friends, Tyler spoke up.
You seem happier these days,
he observed.
More you.
Abel smiled at their reflection in the mirror. I am, they replied.
I'm still figuring things out, but I feel like I'm finally on the right path.
Tyler grinned.
Well, I'd say losing that bet was the best thing that ever happened to you.
Abel laughed, tossing a makeup sponge at him.
Yeah. Don't let it go to your head.
As they finished getting ready, Abel took a moment to reflect on the journey of the past few months. From a lost bet to a journey of self-discovery, they had come so far. The future was still uncertain, full of challenges and questions to be answered. But for the first time in their life, Abel felt ready to face whatever came next. They stepped out into the winter night, the snow crunching beneath their boots. The world sparkled with possibility, much like the glitter on their cheeks. Whatever label they eventually chose, whatever path they ultimately took, Abel knew one thing for certain. They were finally becoming the person they were always meant to be. And that, they realized with a smile, was the greatest victory of all.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!